The chance to shape your future is here. Learn and connect with exciting new opportunities. Are you ready for the next step?
Hi, everyone. Normally, I'd start by asking the audience if there are any guesses as to why I'm sharing a tweet about a pillow company at the beginning of a talk. This is quite difficult to do virtually, so I'll let you think about it for a few seconds. Here's a clue. It's not related to the MyPillow CEO and all the Trump nonsense that happened last week. It's something entirely different to do with data. So maybe the next tweet might illustrate why. This company used GPT-3, which is a deep learning language model, to write product copy. This is really staggering. You know, this actually went out to live people, and it was kind of human decipherable language. There are a whole host of projects though that use GPT-3. They do everything from kind of diagnose illnesses to build websites, create job adverts. Technology and data science is moving at a huge pace, and the opportunities for business are tremendous. And that's really what we want to talk about today. So there are a couple of things I just want to pitch for this. The reasonable question is, how can I get my business involved in some of this stuff, particularly for SMEs? How can I leverage the power of all this data science when we don't have a data science department? We'll cover some of this stuff in the panel, but I just wanted to draw your attention to two easy ways to get going. Both, I think, are present at the Emerging Tech Fest. Knowledge transfer partnerships, where you can use kind of great academics and a partner to build up kind of innovative products, and the Data Innovation Accelerator, of which I'm a member of the advisory board, that work on these amazing collaborative projects, as you can see, kind of 4 to 6 months in duration, and they're cost effective for businesses. They tend to bring out these kind of great proof of concepts, and maybe one of our panelists can talk about their experience with them. The other thing I guess I'd like to do is to talk about this, which is Empiricist, my new organization that I've just founded. So I spoke at this conference last year. I worked for Centrica, and I talked about energy and data in energy. This year I've launched a tech startup called Empiricist. This is the kind of stuff we do. So we're looking at how can we use data to improve businesses? How can we measure culture and understand what that would do to the performance of an organization. So I'm not going to pitch anymore. Other than say, please take a look at our Twitter, because we've just launched and we're very lonely. We'll be available all day, kind of answering questions and talking about data and doing some fun stuff, hopefully. So that's enough of the slideware. There'll be no more slides after this point. And we're going to get straight into the panel, where I will introduce everybody shortly, once I can get my Zoom back up and running. There we go. Okay, so without further ado, I'll introduce the panel and give a brief description of the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about. So we have Luigi De Luca, who's a professor at Cardiff Business School, and he's been specializing in research the past few years on big data and innovation in big data. We have Pedro Perez, who is a data scientist, working data scientist at ActiveQuote, and we're going to be hearing about some of the interesting projects that he's got underway. And then we've got Gabriel Gallagher, who's the MD of Sustainable Energy, a data company, an energy company that uses data massively, and have used the Data Innovation Accelerator. It'd be great to understand some of the challenges specific to that industry as well. So we welcome questions from the audience. Please fire away if you do have any questions, and we'll spend some time at the end going through those if we haven't covered them already. But otherwise, I think we'll get straight into it and start asking our great panel some insightful questions and get the most of their knowledge. So I'll start with you, Luigi, if that's okay. I obviously talked a little bit about the kind of opportunities there are with academia, in terms of KTPs and the Data Innovation Accelerator. Could you maybe describe a little bit about how the business school, Cardiff Business School, can maybe help support some of this stuff, and in particular, if you've seen anything in your research over the last few years that really kind of illustrates how big organizations are using data.
Sure. So thank you, Peter, for the introduction. Yes, regarding the first point, I will speak more specifically about Cardiff Business School, which is the university I work for, but many of the points I think apply to other business schools in Wales or in the UK context as well. The first point regarding how business schools can help businesses work productively with data has two main dimensions to it. The first one is, let's say, a technical one. So we do have traditionally a lot of expertise in data analytics techniques, in forecasting, for example, for big companies operating in the logistic industry, for instance. We do have experience with data analytics in terms of financial markets and economics, sophisticated modeling there. We are more recently moving into new developments, such as the use of blockchain in supply chain and operations, as well as recently launching one of the biggest databases, live databases on Bitcoin in Europe and the world. So there is a technical dimension, which is, applied data analytics from academics who work in the business context, but have a strong data science background. The second dimension to it is the more traditional organizational and sociological dimension of using data and implementing changes in companies and organizations, being their startup organization or large established ones. And that's where I think the social science and business perspective brought by a business school is particularly useful. When companies implement decisions within organizations or in markets, there is always a social and organizational dimension that may determine whether something is successful or not. So it's the contextual element of not only implementing algorithms and data science techniques, but doing so within markets, within organization, with people, with the related cultural change elements that's associated to it. And as you said, we do so with a range of tools, which go from having blended education between business and data analytics, such as our newly developed MBA with data analytics major. We do so through live student projects, hundreds of them every year, when we lend these students, groups or individuals to companies for small projects. You have mentioned the KTPs. I'm involved in two of them, which are a very powerful tool to collaborate between industry and academia, down to a lot of collaborative PhD doctoral projects that we do together with the School of Computer Science and Engineering in the space of data science. So again, to sum up, there's two main dimensions, a technical one, a more contextualized one, and we do so through a range of different collaborative tools, including some funded by KTN, Innovate UK, and the UK government.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Luigi. And having worked at Centrica, where we used KTPs, I think they're a really great way of being able to bring knowledge, specialist knowledge, into an organization. Obviously, at Centrica, that's a really big organization, and we had the kind of ability to absorb that and understand what that impact might be on our business. It would be good, I think, to talk about maybe a KTP at a slightly smaller scale business, and maybe we could go into Pedro to talk about some of his experiences at ActiveQuote. So Pedro, could you tell us a little bit about how the work began at ActiveQuote?
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I think that we are a great example of how a KDP can transform a company. So the problem that the company had, that ActiveQuote had, is that we had a very valuable database, but there was no data science department to take advantage of it. And the KDP was a great solution. because, well, it allowed to bring in the expertise of Cardiff University and myself to work on problems that could improve the efficiency of the company through the use of data. And the main big project that we worked on is in the way that we process leads and contact customers. So traditionally, the system used by the company was a last in, first out. You can think of it like that system where sales advisors would always go after the freshest commercial leads. However, we do have the data to assess what are the customers that are more interested. So we do have we had everything in our hands to develop a more efficient system. So that's where the KDP came in, and we've analyzed essentially variables created by customers as they go through their online journeys. So, and we essentially from those can created a machine learning model that scores customers according to their interests in the product and their propensity to convert, that is to buy a given insurance product. We integrated this system in our existing call center platform, and right now we are essentially going to customers and assigning a high priority depending on the intent that we can assess a given customer has in purchasing a product, which is immensely valuable from at least two perspectives. I think it is valuable for the company because we don't squander so many resources on users that go online but are just interested in seeing. Really, they aren't really interested in purchasing the product. They were just interested in having a quick look at how the process of quoting online for insurance is, and really distinguishing that from people that are really interested in the product, and that's require a bit more attention. Now that increases the experiencing for those people, because we now can say, well, we essentially give attention to everybody. We just focus more on the customers that we know are interested. So we provide a better experience for them, because instead of waiting for a few days to have our services and to be contacted, they can be contacted much sooner, and they'll have our services much sooner. And so I think that's a brief description. We already, so from the system, we already experienced, since it came online, which was just in the previous month, we already experienced an increase in private medical insurance sales, and we have everything to believe from the results we're getting that as we further integrate and exploit the possibilities and fine tune our system to take advantage of this new machine learning system, I think we have everything to increase sales for every other product.
That's great. I mean, you built a kind of sales conversion machine learning pipeline based off of a KTP, a research project. I think that's staggering. You've managed to really give ActiveQuote a massive kind of benefit in their market and a differentiator, and using technology, which I guess one of the interesting things I think around data science today is that a lot of this technology is open source. Effectively it's free. The platforms you use to do this, you need to pay for storage, you need to pay for processing power, but the actual algorithms, they're all available. We can leverage these amazing algorithms in free libraries, which is really great. So the barrier to entry is not really there anymore. It's knowledge. Knowledge is the barrier to entry, I think, being able to understand what it is that you're doing. Which leads me on to talk to Gabriel next, I think, because you've worked in sustainable energy for a little while, and obviously energy is quite close to my heart because I've worked in that sector for the last 20 years. It'd be good, I think, Gabriel, if you could tell us a little bit about sustainable energy, and then maybe how you've used data and some of your experiences with the DIA.
Yes, sure. Good morning. So Sustainable Energy Limited, been around, more than a little while, sort of 22 years. I think we've been operating in the renewable and decentralized energy space. So we're a consultancy developing citywide, decentralized, low carbon energy networks. So as UK needs to transition to the net zero carbon position, the development of thermal networks, so heating networks and cooling networks, are key to this. So these are networks of pipes that run through cities, supplying heat directly to the end users, rather than networks of gas where the gas is then burnt locally to make the heating. So our projects, range widely across UK, from projects up in the north in near Durham, where we have a project that extracts the energy, the thermal energy from disused mines underneath the area, bring the heat up to the surface to supply heating for a new village that's being built. Down to projects more locally, such as Cardiff. We've been involved in the design of the district energy network that will take heat from the energy waste plants in the bay and bring that heat up into the city to heat and provide the buildings, and thus reduce the emissions and carbon content from the existing heating systems, which are generally gas. So I mean, we use data a lot. We're modeling cities, trying to understand their energy uses. So and these projects are likely to the assets put in the ground today will be there for the next 70 years at least. The concepts will go beyond that. So we're building energy networks with looking at the future, what the cities are going to look like, and we need to understand that. So we use data to model what these energy users are. So with existing buildings, we've got build data that you can collect, from automatic metering systems on a sort of half-hourly resolution. Sometimes that's available, sometimes not available, but we need to think about whether those buildings are actually going to remain the same in the future. So we have to go through processes of crunching that data, modeling new buildings that don't exist yet, but we sort of know they may exist. Speaking to citywide planners and agencies who sort of have the visions for how the cities are going to look in the future, and bring all that data together to model a network, therefore predict our demands, and then apply how and what energy systems can supply this. So that's one area of where we use data. Another area, as you said, we did some work with the DIA last year, and that is a sort of whole area around using machine learning to predict the energy uses of buildings, and we've in parallel to that, we've been developing basically an energy platform, which is called Sustainable Intelligence. And this is a system that collects data from operating networks, energy networks, collects the data of the uses of energy, the generation of energy, and sort of pulls it all together to provide sort of optimization and services for those energy networks. And that's an area that we work with DIA on, in applying sort of machine learning to the data. So we collect data from all of the buildings and energy users on a network, and we collect that data on a 5-minute basis, and then we use machine learning to predict what the next 48 hours of energy use will be. We also look at what the air quality in the city is predicted to be, what the future energy mix on the national grid is looking to be, how much wind is energy and solar energy is on the grid, so what the carbon intensity is, and what the cost of this energy is going to be. And with all that data, a process of route optimization and then planning out what would be the best technologies to use at this time, because these energy networks don't just have one supply of energy, they have multiple supplies of energy, and some are cleaner than others, and some use more electricity than others, and so it's all about managing the best approach to that. So that's a bit of an introduction to where we get involved in data.
No, that's great, Gabriel. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was really apparent to me the longer I was at Centrica was that increasingly there's this feeling that an energy company has to be a data company. The data is fundamental to how energy is managed, and I think this is one of the big challenges we'll have in the future. You know, energy is the big challenge of our time. And it feels like we've got a lot of big challenges at the moment with coronavirus and the kind of various political systems around the world. But energy is the thing that's really going to blow everything out of the water, I think, and understanding how we manage it using data, using intelligence is really fundamental. And I kind of want to segue back into your area, Luigi, if that's okay, because, you know, as I've said, and I think, you know, backed up by Gabriel, using data to its utmost is really fundamental for getting the most out of your organization. You've been researching big data in big incumbent organizations the past few years. Are there any takeaways you can give us? Are there any kind of signifiers that what is it that these big companies have got in common? They use data well.
Sure. So yes, as you said, Peter, my main research area over the last few years has been the digital transformation of incumbent organizations that were not digital native. So the problems we were looking at is, you know, in a nutshell, how do I transform the way we make decisions, the way we innovate from you know, non-digital analog based to digital and data driven. So the key takeaways are, you know, there's a few of them. First of all, I think that we observed a sort of sequence or a linear pattern of investments and initiatives that need to be done. And the first one, obviously, is the technological one. So what is key is to invest in the data management and analytics capabilities that will, you know, constitute the starting point for anything that follows. And of course, if you explode this point, there's a lot of strategic choices, you know, IT architecture choices to be made. The second one, which I mentioned briefly before, is to look at the organizational elements. How do you redesign your organization in order to effectively work with data? One question out of many could be, how do you structure your data science or data analytics unit? Do you centralize it in a in a single at a single point in the organization, or do you use data experts and data scientists as envoys in different departments and scatter them around? In terms of the practical applications of data, we noticed three main clusters of big data uses that produce valuable outcomes. The first one mentioned by Pedro is, you know, using data to spot patterns that lead to optimize or maximize a process or an outcome. For instance, how do we optimize our sales funnel, or how do we identify potential customer churn, and so on and so forth. So looking at data to shed light on patterns that are hidden if you don't have access to the technologies and analytics to analyze them. The second one, which is quite big, is the potential for real-time business decisions or real-time marketing. So data allowed to capture the context, you know, time, place, mood, psychology that the customer is placed in at the given point in time, and exactly at that point in time and in that context, a particular is more valuable. And social media are obviously at the forefront of this. The final one, which Gabriel touched upon in his presentation, is the more the aspect related to market and imagination of you know, future marketplaces, future cities, future markets and industries. So how data can help visualizing what doesn't exist at the moment but will come in the future. And that's again a big area where the traditional marketing research tools that are limited to the small data world may be supplemented by different ways to use data to shape and imagine the future. These are the three aspects we identified in companies, which we found linked to a higher degree of innovation out of data. So trying to optimize processes, real-time communication, and explore markets using new data techniques, enhance the company's abilities to generate new products, new services, which could be internal, so adopted by the organization itself, or related to external markets that drive then the bottom line and financial results. Then there are obviously challenges associated to this, which we can talk and elaborate more later on if you wish.
Yeah, no, great. So I like the idea that actually there's a kind of internal focus and an external focus, and both of those are applicable, and both of those are you're able to leverage using data. And I guess when we're thinking about the internal focus, this is probably going to affect the larger firms, the firms with kind of thousands of staff, where an efficiency improvement can mean a huge return on investment, rather than say the SMEs where really the margins are so small that it's the external factors that we want to look at, new product pipelines and the more exploratory stuff. Is that probably fair to say?
Yes, that's definitely true. If you look at the scale of an organization, definitely there are big savings and efficiencies to be made. But on the other hand, the example from ActiveQuote, for instance, relates to a smaller organization where the internal application of machine learning in this case is already generating a positive impact on the bottom line. What the external, let's say, reverberation of this could be is that once the company has developed the capability to do, for example, the lead prioritization internally, then it can turn this capability into a product for the external market. So if they develop a capability of doing that in-house, then why not lending the same type of capability to other companies in the market facing the same problem, same issue?
Yeah, no, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that definitely resonates. So let's talk again about ActiveQuote, I guess, since you brought it up, and in particular thinking about these kind of new product lines. And I know Pedro, ActiveQuote, are thinking about doing some kind of fairly innovative stuff in terms of the way that maybe you match up sales contacts with agents. Would you mind talking a little bit about that? Because that feels like it kind of touches on some of the stuff that Luigi was just talking about, this idea that we can do things entirely differently and have an entirely new way of looking at problems using data.
Yeah, that is one of the next steps that we have in order to improve the existing system. It will be looking into our sales advisors and matching them in an optimal way with customers. So this will involve analyzing what traits, be it psychometric, being from any other traits that can describe our advisors, match to a different product, a different customer, and how can we optimally allocate customers to our advisors in order to make sure that customers are getting the best service possible.
Yeah, it's a fascinating project. I guess there's a lot to unpack there. So one is that it'd be good for you to elaborate on a little bit, I guess, is the ability to experiment inside an organization, because this is an experiment fundamentally, where you're maybe making the hypothesis that there's going to be a benefit to your customers and to you as a business by matching up customers to particular sales advisors. But how are you set up to actually measure the impact of that? Because you're not in an academic environment. There are lots of different variables. Could you talk a little bit about how you're planning to do that in the organization?
Well, we are already doing it with how we delivered Ruby, which is the name for the project. We are already doing it in a way that we're assessing how Ruby is impacting our profitability and increasing turnover. So we have developed reporting that allows us to track, depending on the scores that are outputted by the system, what was the increase in profitability compared to if we didn't apply the system. And with regards to allocations, it'll simply be an extension of the system where we'll assess, well, what was the increase in profits that we had compared to, well, our normally BAU method of just randomly assigning someone.
Mm. So you're kind of A/B testing the two approaches next to each other, I guess. Have you got like a control group, a cohort that are being randomly allocated, and another group, your experiment group, that are being put through Ruby?
Yeah. So it's a scientific approach, really.
Yeah, great. No, it's really fascinating. I guess one of the other things maybe to talk about there are the ethics involved in doing an experiment like this on, you know, real advisors and real customers. There's an element of it where you can think of it as being kind of like the Netflix algorithm, the recommendation algorithm, but with people. So how do you manage the ethics of that internally?
Yeah, no, that was a big concern of us, and when developing the system, we made sure that we were being fully FCA compliant and that all of those concerns were being addressed. So inherently, this is a system that will always increase someone's experience. We made sure that whatever the system output is, we will always give attention, and we'll always serve every customer the same. It's just a matter of focusing more on the customers that we are sure are interested in the product. Now, we could have run into a situation where a serious demographic variable was the major determinant in something, but this is actually it's not really the case. We use demographic variables, but engagement variables far outweigh demographic variables in the system outputs. So whatever your age group or gender, if you interact in the website in a certain way, you can get a very high score according to our system, or not, depending on your engagement, essentially.
Yeah, got you. And I think one of the challenges, I think, with projects like this, that is, and in ethics in particular, is that if things aren't transparent, then it's very easy to draw the wrong conclusion. I think it's, you know, credit to you that you're happy to talk about this project and talk about the ethics behind it. And the more transparency for projects like this, the better, I think, to kind of, you know, remove the veil a little bit and understand actually what is this doing, you know, how are we planning to do this? Because this is one of my bugbears, I think, with data science and with this kind of world of machine learning, the black boxes that control things. You don't really understand how and what is being driven and decided. I think the more we can talk about these things openly in forums like this, the better.
Yes. So we actually did analysis on what variables impact the model and how they impact the model, and we are planning to do some more work on that in the future, because that information might be useful in an assortment of other ways. In particular, it might be interesting to our partners, which are fundamentally to the way we operate. And we'll not only do that in order to make sure that it's an ethical system, but we'll actually actively use them and share them with our partners.
Yeah, which is great, and that helps the whole ecosystem develop as well.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I think this needs to operate. This is how businesses should work with this technology. You know, it's come from open source. It's all been delivered to us for free, these algorithms from academia. So it feels incumbent on us to also keep that spirit alive a little bit and feed back into the wider ecosystem in an ethical way. So I'd like to change tack a little bit, because the other area that I like to talk about. So I really like to talk about ethics and understand the ethical domain for data science. But the other area that you touched on, Gabriel, is around prediction and forecasting. That's another one of my kind of key areas I've talked about and written about before. And you talked about these kind of really long time horizons for energy, which of course we have to think about, we have to consider given the state of affairs. So could you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges there about putting together a forecast for 5 years, for 10 years, and how you mitigate against that?
Sure. So yeah, I guess we're doing two things really. We're forecasting to develop solutions and propose solutions and look how they fit with future building of cities and how a society moves, and also the very short term, actually trying the operational data and we collect both types of data. We're collecting sort of 5-minute increment data, and then when you're modelling out building large construction projects, tens of millions, hundreds of millions in some cases of investment required, then you're looking at larger increments to do with with cash flows and building projects. So yeah, it's a challenge because we've got to think about both of them. The very short term to model energy systems, but also long term in terms of what we're actually trying to serve and how that changes. So our forecasting, typically we address sort of a new project in phases. We just for convenience, we sort of use about 3 phases. And ultimately that third phase needs to take us to that net zero target, whether the city or local authority, company, organization has a 2030 net zero target or a 2050 net zero target. On a citywide application, there's just a massive undertaking to you need to remove all fossil fuels from a city over in some cases, and people there's organizations make 2030 commitments, universities and organizations, private sector, and even local authorities are doing that. So 10 years is making it very, very, very ambitious. So in terms of how we forecast these things, the closer it is, the easier it is to forecast. I mean, our sort of our energy systems that we look out for the next 1 to 5 years. In other words, we need to start constructing, but make it future-proof for 10 years, 30 years, 50 years. Those schemes are very much based on what's here and now and what's in the planning system. So you can get a good feel and a good prediction. However, things always change, and energy networks need to be flexible in that, and you need to be. We have to keep recrunching the data. So you might be 2 years into a program, and the whole area of the city that looked a bit industrial and as previous city plans, it was going to remain that way. Suddenly, 10 to 15 story massive residential and commercial spaces that are going to put a huge consumption of energy on that whole area of the city. So things need to keep on changing. Forecasts and plans will need to be updated continually. And then you've got the sort of the long term aspirations, or sort of phase 3, the net zero in 2050 aspiration. There needs to be some kind of plan. I mean, the principle is you should really have a plan how you're going to get there with today's technologies. The idea is we don't sit around and wait for the new flux capacitor that suddenly resolves all our future energy problems. We've got to have a plan how to get to net zero with known technologies and known systems, and that's the challenging part, taking in consideration that everything is going to. The one thing that is guaranteed is everything is going to change. So we just make our best estimates, ensure that we've got tools to keep on updating them efficiently, and that's when it comes to efficient use of data and the databasing. If things are changing, and you're back to, a month's worth of work crunching, by hand, all these new parameters, then it's very difficult work. So, we're very much in the area of building databases that we can then apply those changes to. I mean, one thing that moves slowly and quickly is building standards, for example. I mean, only in the last couple of weeks, changes to the way future building standards will lead to be by 2025. The ruling out of the use of gas in all domestic homes from 2025. These are all these are all things that are moving fast. Okay, we saw consultations that this was likely to be the case, and commitments maybe a couple of years ago. But the industry, are they really taking on board that actually you're going to build a house without a gas boiler? So yeah, a lot of challenges in predicting how it's going to be, and therefore that efficient collection of data that can be changed and modified as you're moving without going back to the drawing board is essential for us.
Do you keep track of your predictions to see how accurate they are over time? Is that something you've thought about doing, maybe? Because I guess the things have evolved a lot, right? So now data is probably prevalent in putting those predictions together. So as you use more data, are you able to almost turn that into a kind of a pipeline of forecasts and then judge their accuracy?
We do, yeah. We're constantly validating our data and our models and our processes, largely because there are a lot of guidance out there in the building service sector that says, oh, you should model like this or do it like that. And our experience is that these sort of tools that are used for designing buildings are the results aren't what you find in practice, because a building's energy use is driven proportioned by its fabric and its quality of construction, but probably more impacted by who's in it and what they're doing, and all the practices of the occupants, and that's where things change, and that's where we run our models on real data, and that's the benefit of using some actual data for a couple of thousand residences, all consuming heat, power, and cooling, and then apply machine learning to that, look at what the profiles are, and then think about how its environment is going to change, and those models will be far more accurate than the original design models saying, oh yes, we're going to have 1,000 people are going to use this much hot water every morning at exactly that time, and therefore it's going to look like this. We know that those are wrong, and as you say, we need to validate our own models to make sure they do stand up over time, and we do find there are changes. Certainly, I mean, coronavirus has changed heating demand profiles, very much so. So we'll continue to, that one, it's a good example. But how long are we modelling that, that the current energy consumption profiles are going to continue? That's another thing. But as long as we've got the data, we can keep on testing these sensitivities. Will the energy network still operate and be effective and efficient and the right way to do it if we're all at home working, or we're all back in offices, traveling, doing all these other things? What will air quality do? What do we need to do in cities? What's the impact of removing all the gas-fired systems from a city with new transport systems and a move to electrification? So lots of things to think about, and back to the main point that the efficient collection and use of that data makes that whole exercise so much more efficient to do.
Yeah, I think I really like that approach where you've kind of got these different forecasts that are all, likely in some way or the other, but you're not relying on them. You're kind of hedging against them almost. Anything can happen. This is your guidance. This is your kind of guiding principle. But then coronavirus happens, or a volcano goes off in Iceland and grounds travel, or some other big event, some black swan event that you can't account for, and you're not kind of you're not completely reliant on your model. Actually, you're an organization that knows how to function, but you're using the model and the data for guidance of how to function. Is that a kind of fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a good assessment. I mean, we're not modeling coronavirus outbreaks in our modeling, but you do need to take on board that average temperatures are going to increase. That changes how much heating and how much cooling we're going to use around the world. That's that might have massive impacts in some of the warmer cities around the world in terms of how they're going to distribute efficiently cooling to all their buildings, and likewise to ourselves. Are we going to need these networks that are so big if the demands are going to reduce? So
no, it's such a fascinating area. It is the problem of our time and the data problem of our time, I think. And you haven't even talked about the price, the cost of energy fluctuating massively, or the price of solar dropping over the last 10 years. You've got all these other factors that are all feeding in to make it such a kind of critical problem to solve and to understand. It's great. You could talk about this stuff all day. But we are running out of time. I want to move on again, if that's okay. So we've clearly got a couple of organizations here that are really kind of data conscious and understand how to use data and make the most of data. There's a really terrible joke that did the rounds about 10 years ago when Hadoop was all the rage, and it went something like, big data is like teenage sex. Everyone talks about it, nobody really knows how to do it. Everyone thinks everyone else is doing it, so everyone claims they're doing it too. So this was a kind of a parody, I guess, of the fact that big data platforms, everybody had one. Everyone had some kind of data lake, and they used big data and they did data science. Clearly, for the two companies we talked to here, they're doing really great work, and it's fundamental to their businesses. But Luigi, you've studied quite a lot of firms. Can you tell us about this other case where maybe companies that are maybe claiming to use data in that way and they're not quite there? Or even, how do you know if you are one of the companies? Maybe you're an analyst in a big incumbent firm that claims they're doing this stuff and actually they're not. How would you identify that? And is there a particular remedy to kind of fix that?
Yes, that's a very interesting point. And actually, in my work, I interviewed managers from some very interesting companies from the data point of view, such as national post office companies, the equivalent of the Royal Mail in other European countries. So very big dinosaur sort of organization, which, however, always handled big data in their own way. So millions of data points every year. I think the single point I'd like to make, building on the previous speakers as well, is the following. There is a difference between having a lot of data and trying to find a purpose for this data. So what do I make out of all the data I have, and having a purpose and finding the data to go after that purpose. So having a question and using data to address the question following a scientific method. So generating multiple courses of actions, using the data to test those courses of actions, and then selecting based on that. So the difference between, there's a very interesting dichotomy recently in the business literature between data-driven decision-making, which is, I've got all the data, let's make decisions based on them, and decision-driven data analytics, which is, I have to make a decision, I want the best outcome, I need to forecast a certain set of scenarios, let me go out and get the data I need in order to enact this process. And sometimes, as Gabriel said, you don't have the data you need for this exercise, and it means you have to design a system to go and get them. So the single point is that it doesn't matter how much data you have, you don't have to own the data already to start thinking in data science terms. It is about the right questions and the method to address them. So there's a quote, and I'll cite another quote attributed to Picasso, who apparently said, computers are stupid because they only give you answers. I think now with big data, we can generate better questions because of the potential that big data offer to us.
Yeah, no, that's great. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's interesting that there's definitely a clear divide between organizations that are understanding the use of data and those that don't, because the technology is now so much more mature. We've probably had, I don't know, 10, 15 years of this kind of moving into the public consciousness bit by bit. And there's a really clear view, to me at least, that some organizations really understand the value of this stuff, and they know that they can create better products and create new product lines, become more efficient using data, whereas others, there seems to be somewhat of a resistance to it. However, I think one of the other interesting things that have happened over the pandemic is that we've seen lots of organizations become more digital. So I know certainly when the pandemic first started, and everyone was kind of rushing, how can we get food, how can we get supplies? The local fishmonger, the local butcher went online, they went on Facebook, and they produced their products, as an offering over social media. I thought that was really fascinating. I thought that the idea that you can get digital transformation coming out of a disaster like this was a kind of, it's almost like a fascinating social change has happened. Something terrible has happened, and then businesses have adapted. And there seems to be, to me, an ongoing divide between organizations that have done that have become digital and that are using technology and have survived the pandemic, and organizations that haven't. So I want to move on to the kind of final bit, which touches on some of this stuff. I would just say to the audience as well, there's opportunity for Q&A. So if you've got any questions, please throw them at us, and we'll try to get to them. But otherwise, I'm going to talk a little bit about the future again, and thinking about what's just happened with coronavirus, and with this idea that organizations have had to become digital. One of the predictions that I probably make around the future, around data, and how you can innovate using data, is that we will probably see pretty much every organization become digital and use data in some way. And this idea of the citizen data scientist, which was popular a few years ago, I think that will come to pass. I think every organization already uses Excel pretty much. There's this kind of baseline of technology understanding. I think 5 to 10 years, every organization will use what we consider today to be machine learning in some way, whether that's natural language processing, the GPT-3 example I gave earlier, building kind of what we consider to be really sophisticated forecasts that will probably come out of the box in your Microsoft Outlook. So that's my kind of view of the future. I'd be really keen to get what your views of the future are, given we've got such a great panel, and you've all thought a lot about what the future might look like. So yeah, in no particular order, has anybody got a starting point for what they think the future might look like in terms of data? Otherwise, I think I'm going to suggest that maybe Pedro might want to kick us off, because he's a practicing data scientist that has works day to day with these things and can see it changing in front of his eyes. So yeah. Any suggestions, Pedro?
Yeah, I mean, in the last few years, we saw computer vision having massive advance. We saw related to that, object detection, OCR having massive advances. And with what you were saying, Peter, language models, we've had transformer-based models completely, changing the scenario in how we can build language models. And today, I think there will be a lot of opportunities where language models as and supervised generalized problem solvers will be used into a lot of different products. We've just seen the past week OpenAI releasing DALL-E, which essentially connects GPT-3 to generative adversarial network and can actually interpret text and produce images out of thin air. It is stuff of pure imagination. We have huge advances in deep reinforcement learning as well. Once we get to a stage that machine learning frameworks are agile in the sense that we can actually take advantage of deep reinforcement models to solve a variety of business problems that we haven't even started at, there'll be huge opportunities. I think that what I'm trying to say with all of these is that there are so many advancements happening, and there will be similar advancements happening in the following years. And as frameworks develop that make businesses realize that, we can actually solve problems that we couldn't even dream of solving a few years ago. That will create a huge boom in the, well, in the amount of companies that are actually driven by machine learning in terms of the products that they offer and in terms of how they use them for their internal efficiency increase.
Yeah, great. I completely agree. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. It's a really interesting area to be in right now. We don't quite know which direction the next technological advance is going to come from. You know, is it going to be in text? Is it going to be in reinforcement learning again? Is there another game that we're going to be able to use computers to beat us at? Gabriel, is there a particular prediction or kind of interesting area of development that you're expecting to see? Or maybe you can tell us what the city of 10 years' time is likely to look like.
Yeah, I guess we're certainly not looking as far forward as Pedro was suggesting there. We're very much collecting data, so all those sensors and inputs that are coming to us, whether they're APIs or MQTT data feeds, we're just busy collecting data, building and filling databases, and using that data. We're collecting that data and processing that data. So I guess we're starting in a sort of simple area. I mean, the sort of machine learning, looking at which algorithms are most accurate for us, something we did with the DIA, but yeah, we've got to move on to, so we're actually using that to do route optimization, and that will mean that that'll be the next area we need to really develop. So yeah, we're utilizing sort of available techniques as we go along, really. So probably not at the leading edge, but yeah, that's what we are.
Oh, I like that answer. That's good, because the company that has to do forecasts for a living understands how difficult it is to do forecasts. So that was a slightly cagey answer, but completely understandable, and is very difficult to kind of see what's coming. So yeah, I appreciate that. Luigi, is there a particular trend that you've seen in terms of the direction of travel with all this stuff? What's your prediction for the kind of 5 to 10 year horizon?
Well, I'm not sure I can give a big prediction for the next 5 to 10 years, but I think you mentioned the current lifestyle we have due to the pandemic. So everything is online. We talk online. We have meetings online. We socialize. We exercise. We study music. Everything has been digitized, and I don't think the trend will reverse much of this. I think much of this will stay beyond the pandemic, hopefully. And this means that ordinary people are producing a huge and growing volume of data through their everyday actions, the everyday life. And this has a huge economic value. And coupled with the AI developments that Pedro mentioned, it will transform the services industry into a real data science industry, which is leveraging the free flow of data that people generate by just living their lives. So my prediction is that this will become the conversation, hopefully will become the conversation in the future, where the ethics team will be predominant. So how do we, as a society, how do we manage a new form of capitalism where the raw data are a free resource that some very powerful companies may use to gain more and more terrain into people's individuals' lives and existence and work and socialization. So I think that's I don't know whether it's a prediction or not, but I think we are heading there. And some recent events like the censoring of politicians on social media is one of those examples. When the global political conversation is mediated by few powerful data companies, then you may have situations where you ask big questions at the societal level. So ethics is going to become a bigger keyword in the word cloud surrounding data science.
Yes, agreed. So very quickly, we've only got a couple minutes left, but we do have a few questions that have come in. So the first question is, how would you convince a small business to collect data from scratch? And I guess that really depends on the context of what the business is and what they're collecting. But does one of our panelists want to have a go answering that? Maybe Luigi, that might fit into your area. What would you say to an organization, small business that wants to collect data from scratch?
Yeah, I would go back to my earlier point about what is the purpose of the data. So I think the convincing argument should be how important is the question I want to ask. So if you have an important question to understand about your customer needs, your customer segments, the preferences, or how to design a particular type of product, and data may provide a good answer for that, then you have the argument. The flip side is collecting data for the sake of it, or just building a technology that is able to ingest data without a clear purpose is not probably something I would recommend. So start with the question. Agreed. Rather than the data.
Agreed. Yeah. And very briefly, we've got one more question from Steve. So developed a performance management technology platform dashboards, OLAP. Want to move to the next phase, providing alerts and forecasts to inform decisions. Where is the best place to start? So I guess that's a bit of a technology question. I think we probably run out of time to answer that on this session, but feel free to drop us a line on Twitter afterwards @Empiricist, and we can talk about that. Otherwise, probably cloud platforms. There's tons of great cloud platforms that offer all those services. So GCP or Azure or AWS, and they've got great kind of startup teams that can help to support. So I think we'll have to leave it there, although we could go on for a while longer. It's been a real pleasure talking to you all, chaps. Thank you very much for your time. That was really insightful. Thanks for the questions we had. Hope that everybody enjoyed that. Please follow along on Twitter. There's an Emerging Tech Fest tag that you can get in touch. Just one more plug for us, since we have launched it. We're a very small business that are trying to drum up some support. So we're @Empiricist on Twitter. And yeah, it'd be great to talk to you. Thank you very much. Yeah, and goodbye.
Bye. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Emerging Tech Fest. Join us again on our virtual live sessions, or watch us on playback anytime, anywhere.